Welcome to another episode of On the History Trail. I'm your host and tour guide, Mark Nonestied. A silent sentinel to the past still stands in Milltown, New Jersey. Along Washington Avenue is a weather-beaten building that harkens back to the days when rail transportation was king. Built around the time this country was fighting World War I, the Milltown train station served the growing Raritan River Railroad. The building initially served as a passenger station, but was later converted to a freight station. And it also housed the offices of the station master. Today, the building lies almost forgotten, except to a small group of individuals who are actively working to preserve it. On today's episode, we are going to get a rare look at the inside of this boarded-up station that last saw service over 30 years ago and last saw passenger service over 70 years ago. We will get a chance to see a surprising number of original features, including light fixtures, doors, and paneling that still survive. We will also talk with local historian Tom Reynolds, whose vast knowledge of the station will help shed light on its past. And we will also meet Lou Luxu, who remembers the station many years ago from when it was still active. So sit back and relax and follow me as we travel on the History Trail. Well, Tom, welcome to the show. The Milltown train station is really part of a larger system of train stations that were located along the Raritan River Railroad. What other stations were there, and where were they located?
That is correct. The Raritan River Railroad had stations in South Amboy, Sayreville, Parlin area, through South River. They had some smaller stations along the way that sometimes were just platforms. They had stations in Milltown, and they had a nice terminal complex in New Brunswick. Okay,
and so these stations, I guess, did they vary in size and scale depending on the number of passengers or freight that's coming in and out of the...
Absolutely, they were all different sizes. In South Amboy, the station on the New York and Long Branch Railroad was almost a part of an office complex. They had a two-story wooden station in the Bergen Hill section of town. In Parlin, they originally had a wooden station that was rebuilt shortly before World War I into a two-story brick building, which was very, very busy. Also housed some offices for the Raritan River.
Okay.
In South River, they had one of the longest stations of almost 160 feet. It was one of the freight stations. They had also a smaller but equally large wooden passenger station. And some of these stations, too, were rebuilt over the years. The stations that were built in the 1880s or the 1890s were rebuilt around World War I time frame.
Okay, so do you know what the original stations were like? Or, I mean, I would imagine as
they varied. Most of them in the early years were wooden structures or wooden shelters.
Okay, so they're budgeting this into the building of the railroad, the stations.
Typically, a lot of railroads would build the line as quickly and cheaply as they could, and then use the profits to continue to upgrade the infrastructure.
Okay. And you mentioned, so there's wood and brick.
Wood and brick.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a multiple stations. You could call it 3 buildings in New Brunswick. There was a mid-sized passenger station, which was very nice. There was a very long freight station, and New Brunswick even had an express building, which was used for express packages.
Okay, all right. Well, that brings me to my next question then about the purpose of the different buildings. So at a particular location like Milltown, we could expect to see several different types of structures for different uses, as you mentioned, passenger and freight.
Yeah, Milltown had a passenger station and a freight station. In relative terms, I would say it was probably quite busy. Milltown wasn't a super large town, but it had a fair amount of industry. Big names like Michelin or the Russell Card Company, as well as even the smaller industries, all needed packages and freight, and almost all of that exclusively would be delivered by the railroads in the early years.
Okay, and then there's also these express stations as well as in New Brunswick. Were there others along the line?
There were, the express agency was kind of like a high-speed package service delivery that was available by railroads. So there would be agents at individual stations that could take these packages, and it would have been equivalent to the FedEx system or the UPS system today, where if you needed something to get there in the shortest amount of time, then you would use this express service.
Okay.
So there was an express building in New Brunswick. I believe that was the only one on the line.
And what would be the difference then between a freight station and a passenger station? Are they designed differently?
They're designed differently. Essentially, the passenger station is designed for holding passengers and selling tickets and sometimes housing the agent who would be selling the tickets as well as maybe moving some of the freight around. The freight station itself was mostly a bulk terminal for the storage and shuffling around of freight. Freight stations were typically sometimes higher off the ground to be at the height of a boxcar, or even for loading into the carts, and then in later years the trucks, which typically are 3 or 4 feet off the ground.
So we would expect to see them sort of raised up to meet the level of the...
Yeah, with stairs or ramps to typically a ramp so that you could push the carts and things up to the platform.
Okay. Where were some of the more active stations along the line?
Well, some of the more active stations would have been the New Brunswick terminal, as we'll call it, and we call it a terminal because the line ended there, and the trains had to go through a Y to make a U-turn and then come back down the line. But New Brunswick being a terminal, there was just a lot of activity and a lot of products being delivered to New Brunswick. Other stations, New Brunswick and Milltown they had a fair amount of passenger traffic, but really the busiest stations on the line were probably the ones in the middle. Especially during World War I, with all the munitions industries that were going on, that were utilizing the Sayreville and Parlin area, there was an awful lot of passengers and freight coming and going to those areas. And
what happened to most of the stations? I mean, there's only one left today in Milltown.
After World War I, with the rise of buses and cars, and people just didn't need to take the trains anymore. And so by the 1938, the Raritan River Railroad ended passenger service. And a lot of the passenger stations either got torn down, burned down, dismantled, and the wood, they could have been used for other purposes. In the case of Milltown, the freight station was relocated, and the passenger station was moved, reconditioned, raised off the ground, and the passenger station became the freight station. And the Milltown area, the Milltown station became the central agency for all the local freight and the local companies that needed rail.
Okay. So even though 1938 was the last passenger service, some of these rail stations lasted. I mean, I remember the one in Parlin when they tore that down. So some of them lasted quite late.
Right. The Parlin, being a brick building, was very strong, structurally sound, and it was also the offices. So they basically would just in most cases, the downstairs or the first floor would have been the waiting room. So they would have just repartitioned that and used more offices.
Okay. So they served administrative purposes as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So the one in Milltown, that is then the last remaining station from the Raritan River Railroad?
That is correct.
And there are preservation efforts underway to try and preserve that structure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That is correct. The Milltown Historical Society, in conjunction with the Raritan River chapter of the NRHS, is working to move the station onto county land. Okay. We're currently having fundraisers, and we're working with companies to get pricing and project plans for moving the station. We're fortunate that the station only needs to move across the street almost 100 yards, which is really good for us. It'll keep the cost low. But essentially, we are going to pick it up and move it across the street.
Great. Great. And so you have an active group of people that have come together to fundraise to try and preserve the station in conjunction, you mentioned, with the Milltown Historical Society.
It's really a great, it's really great that we're working with the Milltown Historical Society. So from an historical perspective, they're happy to keep a landmark of Milltown.
I'm sure, yeah.
And the Raritan River chapter of the National Railway Historical Society is indeed very happy too, from just a railroading and a history perspective, to keep a really great freight station, from any other fate. So it's nice that we can work together and get this moved.
So the railroad really hasn't used this station since about 1980. I mean, we're talking almost 30 years since the station was last used, and it really isn't only until recently that there's been access from a historical perspective to walk in and sort of look at what's left of the station. How did you feel the first time walking into that building?
Yeah,
I mean, you knew it existed.
I knew it existed for a long time, and obviously growing up in the local area, I had seen the station, for most of my life. So it was pretty amazing to get inside and to see all the original woodwork and some of the original fixtures and things. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, it must have fired you up to sort of help with this preservation effort of preserving the building.
Yeah, it definitely motivated everybody, and it's really, because it's never been modified or touched. It's in its original condition.
Yeah, almost like a time capsule.
Yeah, which is pretty nice.
So tell me some of the fundraising events that the organization has done.
Well, we've had 2 fundraising events so far with the help of the Milltown Historical Society, and up to this point we've raised $5,500, which is really quite an accomplishment. We thank everybody who's been donating for the fund. Ultimately, we need somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 just to move the station. So we're about a third to our goal. We hope to have more fundraisers this year. We hope to have more interactive fundraisers, maybe on or near the property or across the street, especially near the station. That's what we would like to shoot for in the spring.
Right, and so there's no threat of demolition with the building. It's just sort of an okay to preserve it and move it.
Yes, the current owner is very happy with our progress. He just doesn't need the station anymore. He doesn't want it. We want it, so it's a perfect relationship where if we can raise the funds and we can move it and help preserve a historical structure, he's happy to donate it, and we're happy to take it.
Great, and so what would the ultimate goal then be once it's moved?
Ultimately, once the station is moved, we would like to have it restored. In order to have it exist on county property, we need to use it in some sort of an educational purpose, and a museum would fit right into that purpose, or even a meeting room that could maybe be leased out. But ultimately, it would be great to restore it and turn it into a Raritan River Museum.
So I know you've had an opportunity to go inside and take a look at the station, and members of the Historical Society as well, and now it's the opportunity for our audience to go out to the site and take a look at the building. So let's do that.
So we're here in Milltown, standing in front of the old Raritan River Railroad station, and we're going to get a chance to go inside and explore this historic structure. Tell us about this structure. When was it built?
This structure was originally built around 1912, 1915.
Okay, 1912, 1915.
For the World War I passenger rush.
Okay, and so the train line, this is the Raritan River Railroad. When's the train line constructed?
The Raritan River Railroad was initially started in 1888. By 1889, by 1890, they started grading and getting tracks through here. And the first train would have run around 1890.
Okay, so it's running from South Amboy, and where's the other end of the line?
The line ran from South Amboy, went through Sayreville, Parlin, South River, even stopped in East Brunswick, and then Milltown, and then in New Brunswick.
Okay, so there must have been an earlier structure here then.
There would have been a smaller passenger station. Milltown was always a small little industrial town, so there would have been a smaller shelter. But during World War I, with the increase in all the munition plants in Sayreville and Parlin, there was on record 9,000 passengers per day being moved by the Raritan River. So they had to build much larger structures.
Right. Okay.
And
so
that would have been this building. This would have been the passenger station.
right. Tell me a little bit about some of the resources you've looked at to determine the age of the rail station.
Well, we've
train
been
station.
looking at maps and some of the Sanborn fire maps, and plus I have a lot of the official, I have copies of the official Raritan River Railroad railroad maps themselves, the line maps.
Okay. So it's a passenger station. Is that correct?
This was initially the passenger station. It was pretty much almost 50 yards closer to the road.
Okay.
It would have been on the ground so that the passengers can just walk in.
Okay.
This would have been the general waiting room.
Okay.
The agent would have been in that area where they probably would have sold tickets through that window over there. There was also the ability to get tickets from the outside.
Right. So it's not in its original position. So at some point it's moved. Do you know when that happens?
Passenger service ended about 1938. At that point, cars, trucks, buses, I mean, even the trolley had been running for years by this point. And so the passengers weren't a big priority anymore for the railroad. So they gave up passenger service in 1938. And about 1938, 1939, the original freight station, which would have been in this area, was sold to, I believe, the EMS Rescue Squad, at which point they used it as a garage. And the passenger station was moved where we are now. It was raised up off the ground so that it would be at the height of a boxcar.
Okay.
And some of these doors were widened because this used to just be a regular passenger door. And so it was widened so that they could get freight in and out of the boxcars.
When was this last used as a freight station?
The station was in use as a freight station from around 1938 up until the Raritan River Railroad got absorbed by Conrail in 1980. All from the 38s up until the early 60s, it was still used as a railway express agency.
Okay.
So you would have an agent here that could receive packages from the trains. Less carload freight was something that would still be delivered, which was kind of in a sense of just a boxcar filled with local freight that would then be unloaded and then, you know, delivered to the local industries.
Okay.
A lot of that stuff died in the 60s and definitely by the early 70s, and up until that point, the Raritan just mostly used it for storage until they got absorbed.
So then what happens after 1980 then?
After 1980, when Conrail came in, the building at this point was no longer used as a freight station. It has been rented out a couple times over the last 20 or 30 years. It's been used for storage.
Okay. And so there's a movement afoot, though, to restore the building, bring it back to its to its former glory, and actually to move it off its current site.
Yeah, it's a pretty an amazing opportunity to help restore and move an original freight station. And so we've got an effort going to create an organization, to create a nonprofit to help get the funds together so that we can move it across the street and we can then proceed to restore it.
Great, great. Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
So I'm talking with Lou Luxu. Lou was actually in the station in 1971, was it?
Yes,
Tell me about those circumstances, how you came to be here.
I was going to be leaving the next week for Vietnam, so I decided to stop by and see if I could get a ride on the Raritan River Railroad. Well, I started out the station in Parlin, and the guys told me to meet them at the yard in Squibb, so I came by here and stopped in. There was one man working in the bay window in the next room, and I got to come in and look around, and it looks pretty much the same. The freight door, the beadboard paneling still here.
Right, it's amazing that it seems to retain a tremendous amount of its original historic fabric. We were learning a bit earlier about the history of the station, and that this was once originally a passenger station. So this room that we're in, what would this have been, the waiting room for the passengers initially?
Would have been the waiting room, plus they would have kept their freight in here. People would drop their packages off to be delivered on the railroad, and that was all done in this room.
Okay, great. And so all this paneling, this tongue and groove paneling, and we can see even the entire ceiling has it. So these are all, you feel, are original features from that time period.
It looks like it.
Yeah. With I mean, even the original shellac finishing that's still on them. And if we look too at the window, the molding and the hood molding on the top and the sill, again, all original features. So for you and other historians that have studied the railroad and are trying to preserve it, I guess it's great that all of this material still survives.
Yes, I can't wait to get in here and restore the rest of it.
Now, we also learned at some point that this becomes a freight station, or primarily a freight station. And so do you feel some of these other features, like these doors, would have been added at a later date when this became primarily just for freight?
Well, they would have wanted to get freight out anyway when they moved over by the tracks out here. And yes, they would have put the sliding door in here. There was another one over on that wall for people to back a truck up to and unload. Like it was said earlier, the building was raised up to reach the height of a boxcar, and they would have gone right out here and unloaded.
Okay, so on the other side of this door, the track would have come right next to the station. There would have been a boxcar. You could literally just slide the door. The fact the track is still here. Yeah. The wheels that it glides on are still up there. They pull the door, slide it over, and then right on the other side of here would have been the boxcar level with the boxcar.
There's actually a landing out here that wraps around the side of the building.
And there's some other features as well. Early electric lights that survive. They're on the ceiling. There are these porcelain sockets with these cloth-covered wires that drop down where they had a bare bulb. I mean, do you remember all of that when you were in here at that time?
I think I remember more fluorescent
Fluorescent,
fixtures,
really?
although I was here in the daytime and they probably didn't have any lights on. It's dark in here now because everything's boarded up.
Right, right.
But I remember it being very light in here.
Well, we still see that it does have, it looks like very early lights or cloth-covered lights are still present. You mentioned about the ticket agent or the station master at the time was here and that he had his office inside the building. So if we go further down the station, we can see some of those features as well, right?
Right. He would have been on the other side of the wall over here.
Great. Okay, so let's go take a look at that. So, Lou, we're at the other end of this large room, and there seems to be some other features here. Can you tell me what we're looking at?
This would have been the ticket agent window. We can see that the weight is still there, so he could open and close this window. Would assume that was when this was a passenger area at one time, that he would sell tickets or allow the general public in here while the station agent was in the other side.
Okay.
And
It looks like maybe the molding's been removed. You can see some of the scarring up here from where there was a hood molding across the top and on the sides as well. And then so the doorway here, it looks original as well, right? An original door and some early hardware. And what's on the other side of this wall? What use would this have been?
that would have been the station agent area, the bay window where he looked over the tracks and where he did his paperwork.
Great. So can we see that room as well?
Let's go.
Sure. So Lou, this is the station master's office that we're in, correct?
Right.
Okay. And you, in 1971, you walked through the door that's over there on the back wall and came into this room. Can you describe what you saw at that time?
There was another desk in here somewhere, but he would have been sitting here looking out the bay window over the tracks. There were 2 tracks at the time.
Okay.
Now there's only 1. And there was a semaphore, which did the block, told the engineer coming whether he had to stop or not. And that was controlled. There would have been some sort of mechanical device here that he would have moved those with.
Okay.
But this was all open. It's very light when these windows were here, and I remember him sitting at this desk doing some sort of paperwork.
And these look like early features as well. So this must have historically been the office for the station master, doing, when you were here in 1971, doing the same types of things that they would have been doing when the station was first built at during the 19-teens. And there are quite a number of original features that seem to be surviving. I mean, the whole desk area with these 2 doors, right? There's one on the other side as well that survive. And although the room looks like it's been remodeled somewhat, it seems as though they just covered over some of the historic features, right? If we look at the flooring over here, do you feel that that's maybe the original floor underneath later linoleum?
That's what the floor, I remember being bare wood, and you can see as you go up the wall how they covered over the existing beadboard. Mm-hmm. I don't know why.
Yeah, it would seem as though the original looks a lot nicer than this green painted stuff. And you can see, though, areas such as the corner there where the bottom has deteriorated or been ripped out. You can see underneath that the original beadboard there.
It doesn't look like it was shellacked like the other room.
So, Lou, some other features here on the desk area. It looks like we have some very ancient-looking electrical outlets. And and some switches. Do you have any thought about what these may have been used for?
I don't think they would have been enough to change the semaphores, but they may have affected the lights in them. Just judging from the cloth-colored wires and that looks like that's from around the 1930s type of cloth-covered wire and open toggle switches.
Right.
And the other spot where we found the open fuse box also.
And so also in this room, it looked like there was heat. There was a chimney that ran through with a stove. In fact, the vent pipe into the brick chimney is still present.
There was heat from a potbelly stove here, and the chimney is still standing after all these years, and the metal exhaust pipe. And hopefully when we get this place restored, we'll be able to put a good old-fashioned stove back in here.
There's clearly a lot of early features of the building, including electrical items as well. And here we have an old push-button light set, or light switches, that survive with porcelain sockets. It's missing the cover plate, but the push-buttons survive. So right from the light switch right over to the wall here, we can see what was the outline of an electric clock that was on the wall here. You can see the covered wire coming out here, and where there was a clock. And what a great image that gives you of the station master sitting at his desk, looking over at the clock, trying to judge if the trains were on time or not. So for those that are restoring the building, they know right where some of the features were.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode as we explored the Milltown train station and learned about the history of this building. For more information on the station, you can visit Tom Reynolds' website at raritanriver-rr.com. And for comments or suggestions about today's episode, you can visit the East Brunswick Public Library website at ebpl.org. So thank you for watching, and come along again as we travel on the History Trail.